My name is Danielle Look. I'm the content marketing manager at Team Engine, where we provide software to recruit, engage, and retain your deskless workforce. I also just wanted to thank everyone for finding the time to join today's webinar. I certainly understand that it's not easy to make time for things like this, so I do appreciate you being here. And I think you're going to be glad that you're here because Neal has prepared some really unique and very interesting advice to share with you all today. And I don't know if you know this, but before Neal founded Grow the Bench and became one of the green industry's best and most recognized consultants, he actually worked for one of the largest contractors in the US. And in that role, he was faced with the exact same problem that many, if not all of you, are facing right now. And so that's not just hiring workers, but also finding workers to hire. And so that's what Neal's going to talk to you about today. And we do have a very full agenda. So without any further delay, I'm going to hand it over to our guest speaker today, Neal Glatt.
Well, thanks, Danielle. I'm super glad to be here. Thanks, everyone, for taking the time and being here live. If you're watching this on demand later, sorry I missed you in person, but still feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I see lots of names I recognize from some friends in the industry, so thank you for those of you who showed up. And I see a whole bunch of people who I've never met before, so nice to meet you. I want to talk about today how I think we have a unique opportunity in the green industry to really hire and engage workers for success. And my goal is that you'll leave here with some real tactical takeaways that you can implement in your business right away to even improve this season, if not for sure next season, and roll into next year with a really solid plan. And as Danielle mentioned, if you have any questions throughout, feel free to drop them into the chat or the Q&A. I'll do my best to keep an eye on those and answer in real time. If not, we'll take some time at the end. And afterwards, this whole presentation will be made available. I'm happy to email you the entire PDF deck if you contact me, all of my contact information, and it will be available through replay since it's being recorded as well. So let's jump in. And what I want to put in play here is a little bit of context about the total US workforce. And what I plotted here is in green, the number of people who are unemployed, and in blue, the number of job openings in the US. And if you look back on the left-hand side of the screen in January 2010, we had about 3 million open jobs, and we had about 16 million people unemployed. And so there were plenty of people to work and some jobs to be had for some people. But overall, we had this market that was really favoring employers. And as we move through the years, up until about January 2018, it's been tougher and tougher to find people. And this is just really basic supply and demand, right? If there's not enough people for all the jobs we have, then we're going to really struggle to find those people. Now, COVID, you can see for the last 18 months from January 2020 or March 2020, for about a year and a half, a bunch of people went unemployed, bunch of jobs went away. But really, really quickly, we went back to this pattern where the economy has been just red hot, actually kind of overheating. And we've got 11 million open jobs right now, but we only have about 6 million people unemployed. And what I want you to understand here is not the nuance of, is this a good economic picture or not? What's the impact on inflation? We're dealing with all those things and they're important, but listen, we're in the green industry, right? We're not economists here. What you have to understand, though, is that the job market is completely flipped from where we were just 10 years ago. And it's a totally different picture. And so as a result, if we're going to succeed, we cannot be doing the same thing we were doing 10 or 12 years ago. We can't even be doing incremental improvements over what we were doing 10 or 12 years ago. We have to have a radically different strategy if we want to thrive. And that's what I'm going to introduce today. It's going to sound potentially a little crazy because it is so different from what we were just doing not that long ago, but I do believe it's a pathway to success. So maybe not quite as much in the last 6 months, but prior to that, we talked about the need to get back to work as a solution. We got to end this COVID stimulus. We got to stop handing out money, but it's not really that. We've been almost a year since the COVID bonus unemployment money has gone away. We still have 11.4 million open jobs and only 5.9 million people unemployed, which, by the way, is like the lowest ever recorded. And economists argue that it can't really go lower because depending on where you are in the country and what jobs are available to you, there's always going to be a small percentage of people unemployed. And that means we have 5.5 million open jobs. And even given the potential recession that we're facing and extreme inflation, the plans to hire new employees is still at record highs for most big companies. If this changes and goes back to something like 2010, it's going to be a whole different painful reality. I think that we're going to see some corrections there. We're starting to see some market trends, but the true reality of the situation is we need to do something different to really attract people because the standard posting isn't going to work. There's too many jobs, not enough people. And at the same time, people are quitting their jobs more and more. We've heard about the Great Recession. You can see that almost 4.5 million people quit their jobs per month. This has not really slowed down. There are some interesting insights that some people regret it, but in fact, every quarter, 1 in 10 people across the US have quit their job. And so what that means is that we're not finding good fits in the first place. We're not treating the employees well that we have. And it's not just enough to go hire new people. We also have to play some defense in how we work with the people we have. And we'll try and address that as well. So we call this leveraging untapped talent pools. And I'm not going to take a long time to get to the point. There are pools of talent. There are demographics or characteristics of people who we could hire that experience much higher unemployment. They might be people from disadvantaged backgrounds who grew up in tougher neighborhoods, who come from a history of maybe drug abuse or violence or poverty. They could be people who are uneducated or unexperienced. Maybe they didn't finish college or even high school or even middle school, or they're fresh out of one of those levels of education and they just have no experience in the green industry at all. They could be people who are disabled mentally or physically to any varying degree. They could be immigrants, people who have come to this country legally, but have struggled to find a job and build a community here. They may be veterans who are struggling to find a new identity after their military service. They could be people who are long-term unemployed for whoever reason, have many years of under or unemployment on their work record. They could be people who are formerly incarcerated. Do you know that people who were formerly incarcerated are unemployed at 5 times the national rate? They're just so less likely to find a job because there's issues that prevent them from a skills, from a background check, from getting employed at many places. Or they could be retirees, people who have taken an early retirement, and there's a ton of them right now, who maybe are finding that they still want to work in some fashion or some capacity that could be employed. Now, these talent pools I'm calling untapped because we see when we look at them that there's a much higher level of unemployment. These people are more likely to be screened out of the process. And what I'm suggesting is that in the green industry, we have an opportunity, a rare opportunity, to employ some of these people. For instance, if you do landscape maintenance, or you have a garden or nursery center where there's somebody who's not in a public facing capacity, someone's appearance who's working for you does not matter. Someone who has face tattoos or piercings, or someone who is not super articulate, or maybe has trouble socially conversing with people, can really thrive in a way for us because we don't have those requirements where they may really struggle to work a cash register or work in a bank, for instance. We also tend to have very low requirements, typically speaking, for anything regarding high security. Now, I know even when I was a contractor, we had certain accounts where it was mandated that our people pass some sort of background check. Excuse me. But even then, we were able to hire many people, regardless of their background checks, to work for us. And so we can hire them, but only if we're really cautious about ballooning job descriptions. And so what we see over time is that human resources or legal will actually cause us to inflate the requirements for jobs. And we have to be careful about that. Some examples that we see is computer programming showing up in job descriptions for nurses because they're required to input patient data, which is just clearly not the case. We've seen retail clerks need to have floor buffing experience because they'll occasionally clean the floors. And that's just not true at all, right? Or electric linemen requiring customer service experience, which is ridiculous because the chances of them interacting with a customer are slim to none. And so the question is, have you programmed in any of these job descriptions or requirements that you don't really need? Because if you have, you're potentially blocking out these untapped talent pools from ever reaching your desk as a quality candidate in the first place. You know, typically when we screen for applicants, and I know I used to do this the first time I hired somebody ever in 2010, I got like 200 applications for an unpaid internship. And I had no idea what to do. So I just started filtering through them. And I was screening people out based on their experience or their education, their technical skills, maybe if they had an employment gap, or if they didn't have a certain professional credential, I would filter them out. Of course, we use background checks as a way to narrow down the field, and referrals are always popular. And I remember just throwing resumes in the trash can because I had no idea what to do with them. And if somebody worked for a pizza place, I would say, well, they probably can't work for a landscaper. And I would throw out that resume. Well, we don't have that luxury anymore. But I also think about, 10 years later, those people who, just because they spelled a word wrong on their resume, does that mean that they really weren't a talented employee? Probably not. I make spelling mistakes all the time. And so I think we need to rethink our applicant screening if we're really going to find the employees that we need. Now, this whole idea is called open hiring. And believe me, I know it's at the far end of the spectrum from what we've been taught in traditional business. But I want to give you a case study of how it works. There's a retail store called The Body Shop that you may know from some malls. They sell bath and body products, and they tried open hiring for their store associates. And so what they did is they only asked 3 questions of anybody who wanted a job. They said, are you legal to work in the US? Can you stand on your feet for 8 hours? And can you lift up to 50 pounds? And if you answered yes to all 3 of these questions, you would get a job. It was first come, first served. So the first person to apply was the first one to get the next opening. And they just rolled through the list. And they did it on a pilot basis. And the stores who piloted this open hiring approach for The Body Shop actually saw really amazing outcomes compared to the stores that didn't. Specifically, 60% lower turnover for seasonal employees and increased productivity of 13%, which is huge. Now, why is it that these people were less likely to leave, let alone be more productive? Well, in my experience, what I found is when I hired people who were in a really tough place in life, who were getting passed over for jobs, when I gave them an opportunity, they were super grateful for that position. I also found that these people were really looking to make a positive change in their life, and they were ultra motivated internally to do better at their job. And when I treated them humanely and gave them a chance, they would work harder and longer for me than anybody else. And I think that's what the body shop found as well. By the way, the time to hire is reduced 80%, which makes sense because you're not asking any crazy questions. So if you need people right away, this is a great way to do it. And hiring costs get reduced 93% because we're not doing background checks. We're not spending a bunch of time calling people. So the results are real, even if the idea can seem a little out there. But for the green industry, I believe that it's possible. Now, if we're going to embark on these talent pools, how are we going to screen people? Well, if I owned a nursery center, a garden center, a landscape maintenance company, here's the questions I would ask to screen. Of course, you have to be able to work legally in the US. I would ask about the distance to the job and make sure that they have a willingness to commute. This doesn't necessarily mean an ability to commute. I had a ton of success in my career as a contractor hiring Ubers to take my people to and from jobs as needed. And that may be a cost of doing business that we need to consider. They need to, of course, have a physical ability to do whatever job we're doing. They have to have the availability to work. And I think a willingness to learn is super important. Outside of these 6 things, I'm not sure what else we really need for our frontline people. And when I think about the companies I know who are giving up sales or changing their hours because they can't hire enough people, and they're sacrificing revenue and growth opportunities as a result, I would say your screening level is probably too high. Because the reality is, what we do is pretty simple and can be taught to just about anybody. Now, as we're approaching these talent pools, we may need to change, of course, the job descriptions, of course, maybe some responsibilities, for sure, our managerial posture and how we work with them. But I think also we need to change how we make it easy or difficult to apply. So I would suggest that you streamline applications. And that would probably mean only requiring basic information, like your name, contact information, address, and some relevant experience or education, perhaps. I have gone to green industry company application pages, and some of them are full on invasive. You're asking for referrals and degrees and licenses. And this is for frontline workers who we know don't really have any of it. So, do we need to know all this, and do we need to know it all up front? Again, in 2010, we could get away with it. We could be really picky. Today, how can we streamline things? I would also make sure that your applications are mobile friendly web forms, because people prefer to do things on their smartphone more and more, and they need to be able to apply for a job that way as well. And I would use text to apply and advertise offline with QR codes. QR code to work for you needs to be on your truck, your yard sign, your business cards, because nobody's going to remember a long, complicated URL. And being able to snap a picture of it and go directly to that page is the way to move forward. And then we need to respond fast. So typically speaking, the first to respond is going to win. North of 70% of job applicants accept the first position that they're offered. We never can take more than 24 hours to respond. And I'll tell you why in a moment. And I think we need to create personalized, automated messages to respond in a way that really kind of sets that hook with applicants. I would also use text first and then deal with the phone only if there's a fit. And the reason why we have to respond this way is because of the Home Depot. So this past spring, the Home Depot needed to hire 100,000 people for their big spring rush. And their global vice president of talent acquisition had to come up with a way in order to make sure that they were able to hire 100,000 people at a time when we were experiencing not enough labor. So his plan was what he calls accelerated hiring process. And essentially, it's a company-wide policy where you will be offered a job within 24 hours of applying. So imagine that rare job applicant who comes to your garden center or your business and puts in an application, and then whose next stop is the Home Depot up the street. Will you have beaten 24 hours to give them a job application or a job offer? If you don't, then I think it's going to be a problem. And I think that we need to really make speed faster. So we do have a good question I want to address here because I'm talking about lowering the bar and putting up with more things. Somebody says, how does an employer work around the legalization of marijuana? For safety purposes, clearly companies want clean drug screenings, or they have clients that require it, but the state deems it legal. This is a real problem. And we're in this weird space where client expectations and job requirements haven't caught up with public policy yet, right? And so I'm definitely not a lawyer, and this isn't legal advice. If you have a client that requires drug screenings, then you have to comply with that. My requirement for frontline labor was that we weren't going to do drug screenings, but we did expect you to show up sober on the job. Now, if your client requires more than that, you're going to preclude a big population, but it is legal to smoke marijuana now off the clock. And so if somebody shows up who is not under the influence, but is showing in their drug screening, it's this weird problem depending on your state, right? And so it's really challenging. But what I would say is go sit down with your insurance, your risk management, your legal, and your HR people and say the reality is a large percentage of our workers are probably going to be smoking marijuana off the clock. How can we adjust our requirements where we're safe? And that's always going to be manager discretion on the job. But so that we're not catching people in drug screens and punishing them for something that's legal. Unfortunately, it doesn't clear the system the way that alcohol does, right? And so it's this really tough area. I'll give you another example of something similar that we dealt with. We did not require people to have background checks at our company if they were frontline labor. But if they were driving a vehicle, then they were required to. And I had a guy who worked for me in this sort of open hiring approach for about 4 years. He started as a shoveler. He got promoted to be the main shoveler on call. So he got to spend some extra time on the job. The year after that, he was promoted to the shoveler supervisor. So he got lots of hours and was calling other people. And then he applied to drive a truck. And unanimously, we all agreed that this guy was an excellent worker. He had great referrals from his colleagues he'd worked with. And we pushed through this application, which triggered internally a background check. And I got called up to HR to discuss this guy's background check because it was thick. There was a lot of stuff in there that was frankly shocking. And the message to me was, Neal, there's no way that we can put this guy into one of our trucks. He probably shouldn't even be working for us. And my response was, I understand what he's done in the past, but for the 3 years that he's worked for us, he's been a model employee. And what's showing up on the paperwork is not the person who's been showing up on the job. So how are we going to punish him for doing such a good job that he's been promoted to this point? How are we going to punish him because we want to trust him based on his performance? But now we've discovered this. It doesn't make any sense. And we had to sit down with our HR and ownership and legal and basically make the case for creating an exception. And they had us put in some things to protect the company from liability. But at the end of the day, we were able to give him a promotion despite that. And to me, when I think about everything that I accomplished as a contractor, it's stories like that that really make the difference. Um, when I think about what really matters, it's not the tens of millions of dollars of contracts that we sold or the profit we created. It's the job opportunities that we created for people who were looking to improve their life after making potential mistakes in their past. And I think that, the legalization of marijuana um, fits right in with that conversation. The question is, how how are you going to be able to provide a safe working environment for people despite the choices they make off the clock? And maybe just like, we've all kind of agreed that cigarette smoking is not a healthy choice. Maybe there's smoking, anti-smoking conversations and health coaching that you'll involve around this over time. But it is legal, and it shouldn't be something that we punish people for, in my opinion. And there's a million instances of like that with this untapped labor pools that we have to cross. It's a real challenge, but the reward is finding people. So thank you for that question. Now, when we talk about making this application easy, I think what we need to have is more small steps. So engage somebody really quickly to confirm their basic info, but then really quickly schedule an interview and confirm via text message. I would remind candidates of the scheduled interview and then welcome them warmly and be prepared. And I would do whatever we can to shorten the interview process and get them on the job as fast as possible so that we can hire them quickly and keep them engaged and then onboard them well. And when we talk about the communication throughout the hiring process, what we want to see is communication with applicants all the way through from before they apply to when the application is received. Of course, when we have the screening conversation, when we confirm from the time for the interview, reminding them of the interview. Of course, we need to communicate during the interview with them and after the interview, and then throughout onboarding. The reality is, companies are lucky if they're having even half of these conversations. And I think the reason why they're getting ghosted by candidates is they're not just engaged enough and quick enough in their communication. The other problem is we're trying to communicate with applicants all the wrong way. So applicants today want to communicate in real time. They want to do it via text message, and they want to have a conversation as opposed to something very formal. They also want concrete terms and reminders and to see that there's a real human behind the fact here. So when we talk about text message, it's really the best method. And this doesn't mean that you need to use your personal phone. You need to have a solution in place where you can send texts to job applicants because text message is easily available. It allows super quick turnaround and it's low pressure. And it's really the preferred method of how many of us communicate, particularly these people in these untapped labor pools. The younger the worker and the less experienced the worker, and the more blue collar the worker, the more they're going to prefer text to phone call or email. They may not even have an email. They may not check it regularly. They may not have grown up on the phone as much as communicating via the phone as much as they have communicating via texting. Now, the beauty of text messages, you can automate a lot of it in a way that doesn't feel automated. And that is one of the findings that Team Engine has seen is that with Team Engine, if you apply for a job, you have the option as an applicant to say, yes, please text me about this job. When people click that, 99% of text messages that are sent are read, and 97% are read within 15 minutes. So this is the way to really engage the workforce quickly and beat other companies to hire those people. And then finally, I want to talk about job postings. So we need to start with a good advertisement. That's going to focus on value over price. That's going to focus on the same tone as customer advertisements. You're going to describe the mission and vision of what you're doing. And you're going to discuss the opportunity. So I already told you how we had the opportunity for people to start as snow shovelers and work their way up to truck drivers. What I didn't tell you is that people chose to work for us not because we paid more. In fact, we paid much less. But we didn't tell them, hey, we pay $10 less than the competition and it's on the books and it's not cash, right? What we told them is we do something really important here. If you work for me this winter, we're going to go shovel these CVSs so that everybody can get their medication and stay healthy all winter long. Like you might be working at a grocery store, so everybody can go buy milk and eggs and bread so that they can stay fed throughout these really tough winters. Like you have to understand the reason we work so hard at these transit stations is so people can take the train and go into the city and still work and make a living despite the biggest blizzards in New England's history. So you have to understand what we do here is we shovel out the utility companies so that even when the power goes out, it can be quickly restored and everybody can have heat and electricity and survive. And our company is so big and so important that if we don't do our job, society just ceases to function in the wintertime here. And people signed up for it. I hired thousands of people to do snow shoveling for $15 an hour, not because we paid better, but because our mission was so clear in their minds. And I believe that's the opportunity we have to create for people. In fact, if you advertise what we call CSR, your corporate social responsibility, this could be things you're doing for the environment. This could be things you do for charity. This could be investments in community or your mission for diversity or inclusion. This could even be the fact that you want to hire people to give them a second chance at life. If you show those in your job postings, it's been proven that you'll get an 11% response rate increase, which is the same percent response increase as increasing your hourly rates 33%, which is crazy. Now, if you can do both, you should, right? We're not going to talk about living wage today. But my point is, if your company exists for a purpose, or if you can tie it, what you do into something that's good, you will start to attract far more candidates if you discuss those things. When candidates are looking at jobs, they're attracted to perceived organizational fit, perceived fit to the job, the way that they're treated on the job, the prestige of the organization, developmental opportunities, challenging work, and organizational image, all before pay and benefits. Pay and benefits don't even make the top 7. But when I read most job postings, they talk about the company's background and they talk about the pay and benefits. And it's no surprise that we're not attracting enough candidates or that they're leaving so quickly, because there's always a company to offer bigger pay and benefits. If we focus on the things that actually matter, then retention goes up dramatically. Now, where do we need to promote jobs? Well, certainly on job posting sites. And employee referrals are always a great place as well. But I think we need to do a lot more offline recruiting. And in addition to social media and company career pages, if we're going to target some of these untapped talent pools, we need to find out where they are. One of the organizations that I used to work with for an untapped talent pool was called Adult and Teen Challenge. They're an international organization. They operate facilities across the North America for men and women separately who are looking to overcome whatever addiction they have in their life. And these people check into the program for about 18 months. They put their whole life on hold. And I would go to these centers and I would network with them. I would hire them while they were in the program once they reach a certain level, and I would hire them when they graduated. And these are people who typically had some background check, had unemployment issues, or lack of education or experience that prevented them from getting a job elsewhere. And they were my best workers, hands down. And so, in addition to all these job promotional areas, it's this offline recruiting in these niche spots where we can really make a difference when it comes to tapping these untapped talent pools. But you have to be creative and you have to know your community. So of course we see that Indeed and Facebook and Craigslist and LinkedIn tend to be the best job posting sites. But you have to be posting basically daily in order to stay relevant. And if you haven't figured it out yet, all these things are a lot of work. How can you be posting all the time and texting people in real time and accelerating the job process? Well, before I tell you how, quick best posting practices. Make sure you include the pay range. I would experiment with different titles, experiment with different areas and zip codes, and check daily for relevancy, and then repost whenever it's available. So if we're talking about text to apply, we're talking about immediate interaction. We're talking about easy mobile forms. We're talking about posting daily. We're talking about QR codes. This can be overwhelming for sure. Fortunately, Team Engine has provided all these solutions. And the reason why I'm here doing this webinar is because Team Engine heard about me and invited me to do it. And over the past year, I've had a ton of clients had amazing success utilizing their service to implement all of these things. And if you want to try it out, I recommend you scan the QR code. They'll give you a free trial with no credit card required in order to try out the system for yourself and fill you in on the details of how you can implement these. But I guess the real question is, why should we improve here? You know, the whole world just really wants a good job. And I believe over the next 30 years, the world's going to be led with economic force alone. And that jobs are really the heart and soul of a nation and what sustains us, but we don't really talk enough about how good jobs are created. And I believe that if we do better here, we can actually change the world. I truly believe that if you leave this webinar and you go back and you just become a better employer, you will create economic force in your community. And if we all do that together, it'll improve the states and this nation as a whole. And if you want to help me do that, I got 2 ways for you to help me, because this is what I'm dedicating my life to. Number one, just leave here and go build a great workplace. You're the only person who can make these changes, unless you call me up and ask me for help. But if you want to help more, you can refer me to speak. I'm only here right now because somebody referred me to Team Engine in the first place. And I speak at national trade shows. I speak for individual companies and love to talk to an audience if you know someone who needs your help. And definitely keep in touch. That's my cell phone, my email. You can hit me up on LinkedIn or Facebook. If you want our weekly blog, you can text bench to 42828, or you can sign up on trial.growthebench.com for some more free education. And so I'll leave this up and answer any Q&A for the next few minutes if you put it in the chat or the sessions. Danielle, did you have any questions come through?
No, I've been keeping a pretty close eye, just that one that you kind of answered on the fly, but I suspect people may also just be kind of letting everything soak in and thinking about how this could impact them personally. So those of you that are still on the call, feel free to hop over to the Q&A and drop any questions in there. If you have any, these are great ideas, but I can see how it's so radically different that there might be some serious concerns about how it might apply in your specific situation. So right now would be a good time to drop any of those questions in there.
Yeah, for sure. And if you want to try out Team Engine, here's that QR code link again. Feel free to scan it or drop that link into your browser and sign up. I've really had phenomenal feedback from my clients who have done it. Where do I find the folks in these untapped talent pools? Great question. I mean, it's going to be community by community. So I think you need to start with which talent pool are you going to work with? It could be an independent center for living. It could be a job rehabilitation program. It could be a prison system or addiction recovery or church. And I think that, really figure out who you want to target, try and find one of them, and then go pour into that community. The other thing I'd say is leverage employer referrals. So you probably have employees already who do well and are from some of those areas. And I would ask them, hey, where do I find more people like you? So excellent question. Employee U, phenomenal company. They sponsor on the job training programs. They pay wages, insurance for 8 to 12 weeks. Liz, thank you for that. By the way, Liz Lark Riley is like the guru when it comes to customer service and team management. So she's out of Florida and does some really awesome things. And I think employs several hundred people, if I'm not mistaken. So certainly has some basis for this. All right. Well, I think we're out of questions and we're out of time. Oh, sorry.
We got a couple more coming in. We've got one from Matt Rich asking, what is the best way to help teach and guide owners to make changes? He says he's had good success doing what you talk about, but can't get other managers or owners to do so. And he says, when I interview myself, I ask if they are doing anything like these small changes, and almost always they say no.
Yeah, good question. So it's tough, right? People have to get to this point on their own, but certainly a good point might be sharing this webinar with them. It's going to be recorded, so send it over, and I'd love to hopefully impact them by hearing, success stories like this.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Neal. The numbers don't lie to upper management and owners. And so, there were some great stats that you shared in the presentation today. I'm sure there's lots of other data that's available out there. So find data, statistics, numbers that prove, because, facts can't be argued. They're facts, they're the truth. So you can say, here's what I'm doing. Also, here's the realities of the situation. And, hopefully that can be convincing enough to get more people on board. But change is hard and it's a slow process. So, it'll be something you have to work on for the long haul for sure.
Mm-hmm. So we have another good question about a company who uses H-2B. So you have to word your advertisements to not attract U.S. labor to meet the requirements of the visas. But there's not enough people available through H-2B. So you need U.S. workers too. How do you balance this? Super tough. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't have experience with H-2B. I don't really believe that's a sustainable program for most of us, given the strict limits recently. I think it's a great program, but needs to have more people. My suggestion is, can you create 2 parallel positions, one for H-2B and one for non-H-2B, or for U.S. workers, that are technically separate and different enough, but can still kind of cover for each other based on the amount that you get. Again, check with a lawyer on how to do that specifically, but that would be my advice. And then our last question. In order to have an open hiring approach, your workplace must be prepared to take on additional training, coaching, and employee engagement. Exactly right, right? Do you have resources for this? I do. It's what I do for a living, and it's the reason I started growthebench.com. So growthebench.com is set up for employees, frontline managers, and frontline workers and managers to get industry-specific training in short video format. Most of our modules are 10 to 15 minutes. We have about 400 of them, and it's ultra affordable. And so my clients have had a lot of success implementing this as a training solution to aid with their on-the-job training. And I think that would be super helpful for everyone there. So you can try that out for a free month by going to trial.growthebench.com. If you want to talk about how to implement it, I'd be happy to talk with you.
All right, Neal, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. And also thanks to everyone on the call. And we will, as mentioned, be sending out a link with the recording of today. And that's also a great opportunity for any follow-up questions. And don't forget about that free Team Engine trial as well. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.